All right, welcome back to the Technology Innovation Hub. So this is a session from DevOps channel. So let's continue the third session, that's setting up a basic CI/CD pipeline. So we just configured Docker. So let's continue the next step. Let me share the screen. Right. Hope it's visible for you. Yeah. Okay. Right. So this is what we have been doing on. We just finished configuring Docker, right? SU, and we just follow this document, and now our Docker is up and running. So we can check in my case. Let's check Docker. Yeah, so Docker is available, right? So Docker status command. I think we ran it last time also, so that's fine. Docker version and Docker status, we did all of those things, right? Yeah, so system control status Docker service. Yeah, I think I can check that again. Right. To define our environment, no changes has been made. Yeah, it's up and running. Right, okay, fine. Right. Let's continue the next step, right? So next step is we need to set up the pipeline. So as the first step, so I'm switching back to the other document which I showed you in the previous session. Before the previous session, in the very first session, I got this document to show this one. The next thing is we need to create a GitHub account, right? So you all need to create a pre-GitHub account, right? That is nothing. It just you can have in Gmail or whatever and create an account. That's fine. That you can do on github.com. Then what you can do from this repo, just poke our small example. You can get it poked, right? One example is just a hello world Java program, right? So if I just visit there, yeah. So this is TNH, the official Git repo for our DevOps portal. So hello world is a small Java program. It's a Maven based project, right? So you can get it poked, right? And just log in your newly created Git repo, and you can just click poke. Because it's disabled for me because I have already poked it from a different one, right? Different one means my one of another repo, Luxury B76 repo. It's a different repo, but you can use this one and get it poked, right? And then you can see update. Okay, that is my previous repo. That's fine. All right. So then we go to the create. That's okay that you can poke it and get it copied. And the next step is setting up Jenkins, right? Because Jenkins is going to be our CI server. That means build server, right? Continuous integration, our build. So the artifacts is going to be managed by Jenkins, right? Let's see what does it mean. When you really see it in action, you will realize what does it mean, right? So the next step is that, but we are not going to do a manual Jenkins installation, right? Downloading Jenkins and all those things we are not going to do. As I said earlier, we are going to install on, we are going to pull a Docker image. We are going to install Jenkins using a Docker image. So we just need to pull a Docker image from the official Jenkins repository, and we will run it. Let's see how we can do, right? But there are certain prerequisites. That's why set up Jenkins on Docker, right? Follow the Docker installed document, right? So that's the same document we have been following, right? So we have been following the document. I will upload these things to repository, following the same document for Docker install. So now the next step is Jenkins install, right? Jenkins install means Jenkins with Docker, right? Docker network create Jenkins. Yeah, it's like this. That's the very first step, because now still we don't know that much of basics on Docker, because I haven't done a Docker session for you. But if you are already familiar, it's fine. But very soon we are going to have a Docker basic session, right? But with the practicals, try to understand the basics, right? So because now we have network, right? In now I am running a VM, right? I am running a virtual machine, right? You can see I'm running this particular DevOps VM. and I'm having my host OS. This is the Windows 10 one, and I'm having the guest, right? Guest is my DevOps on. Within that, I'm running Linux, right? So you can see the networks. I have my host has a different network, guest has a different network, right? So and within that, I'm running Linux, right? So therefore, different networks are there. So similarly, for Docker also, there is a network. We learn it more detail because Docker, we are having a separate IP. Each and every container, we are going to have a separate IP because container is like another machine, another computer, right? So we are going to have a different IP. So that means you're going to have different network. So therefore, our Jenkins container going to have a dedicated network because it's a container, right? Because we are going to pull the image. Once the image is run, Jenkins is going to come up. That means once the image is run, container will run. That means Jenkins application is going to run. So actually what has happened, our normal Jenkins installation is package it up. It's a bundle up to image, right? And we are just nicely without doing installation, we are just easily pulling the image. So what will happen? The image contains a Jenkins executable, right? So once the image is running, automatically internally Jenkins will run, right? So, but as per the Docker concept, when the image is running, what you are telling is a container is up and running, right? So for a container, there's a different network. Right? Per container, there is a different network. And the only thing is this, the container, the network is maintained at the Docker engine level. It's a Docker engine level. So that what I want to say, we are not going to have different networks for each container, right? We are going to create the network at the Docker layer level, right? So we can share one network among many containers, right? We can share a network among many containers. So now I am going to create a network at the Docker level, right? And I am going to attach it to my Jenkins container. Because at Docker level, right, Docker engine level, Docker infrastructure level, we are going to have networks, we are going to have volumes, storage, and those things, right? Persistent volumes, let's see those things later. So the time being, the very first thing is we are going to have a network at the Docker infrastructure level, right? So this is a very small command to create the Docker network, create Jenkins, right? And okay, let's do that. Right? I think in my case, I'm having this network already, so we can check that one. Let's check the network list. Yeah, so these are my networks at the moment. Now you can see I have a different network ID similar to the container ID. Whenever resource is created at Docker level, I'm going to have an ID, unique ID to identify. Now I can see there's a network named Jenkins. I'm having 99 different networks here. I have already created. But if I want to try that one again, Docker network create Jenkins, so I'm going to do the same name. It is already there. Let's see what happens. It says already exists. One in your case, you need to create it because you don't have. It will say network created, right? So you can see the document, the output is there. This is the output. It will give the a long ID because that's a resource. Right? So don't worry about those things, but try to understand what I just mentioned. A network has to be there in Jenkins when you try to run containers. If you don't create a network, what's going to happen? It will use the default one. But since we are going to do some setup, we are going to have a CI/CD pipeline. It is always better to take the control onto our side and rather than depending on the default. So we are going to have a predefined network for our CI/CD environment for the CI server Jenkins container. So Jenkins container will be running on our own network. So that's what we are doing here, right? Okay. And because later I'll tell you one more point. When you try to communicate between containers, right? Now, in this setup, we will have to communicate with Jenkins container and maybe with a deployment container because we are going to have CentOS as well. Now, when you want to communicate between containers, those containers has to run on the same network. So I am going to put the rest of the containers also into the which network, Jenkins network. You will see that one later. The time being, just try to get an idea, right? Network Jenkins is created. Right. Then the second prerequisite is we need to have Docker volume Jenkins for certificates, right? Because when communicating between these Jenkins, jobs are going to run and different communications going to happen in different tools. It needs authorization. So therefore, we need to maintain the certificates, right? So that's why we are creating a volume for certificate. Sorry, volume for certificate Docker volume create Jenkins Docker certs that will maintain the certificates, right? So let me check that one. I think I should have that one also created. Let's check if it is there. That's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Anyway, even if it is there, it don't give me error, right? So it will override that, and that's okay. Forget about that. Just for the time being, just think it is a place to store the certificates belong to Jenkins when there are communication between different resources. That's it for the time being, right? With MTLS, mutual transfer layer certificates, and C certificate authority, we are not going to discuss now. Right? Those things are going to come later, right? Okay, so that is that, and after that, we need to have another thing, volume for Jenkins data. Right? Jenkins data is very important because it's not like a normal installation, right? So I mean, where we are going to keep the configuration stuff and the information when Jenkins is going to run the builds, right? So when it's running the builds, it's going to keep the artifacts and all there are configured files, and it needs storage, right? To run the build, need storage. Now, in our environment, we don't have installation. We are going to run a image that this container is going to come up. Now, this container is not a permanent thing. It's a transient thing. Transient thing means as far as it's running, it's running. Right? If I stop it, right? If I say Docker stop container, what will happen? It will stop. So all the things which was running will get destroyed because it's a runtime environment. Container is a runtime environment. Right? So therefore, whatever things are not persistent, it's not permanent, it's a volatile environment. Right? So therefore, what we have to do to make these contents persistent, to keep these things even after container is going to shut down, right? We're going to have a different volume. That is what we are telling as a persistent volume. So this volume will maintain the configuration and whatever storage requirement. It will support the whatever storage requirements which is required by Jenkins. So that even if the container goes off, this particular data will remain as it is. So that's why we are going to create a volume. So persistent volume, PV volume creation, we will see later with Docker. Right? For the time being, I think that explanation is pretty much enough, right? So Docker volume create. So let's try that command. Yes, so that is done, right? So Docker volume create. Now, I may have a question where this is getting created then node. Okay, I can show you that, but it's too early to dig into those information because our objective is a different thing. If it is really required, we can just, I think in last video, so okay, we can go in here, we can see cd, var, we can check lib, right? And we can go Docker, right? This is the place it's going to have, right? And oh, oh, permission denied for this user. Docker user. Okay, that is interesting. Let me check that one, right? There cannot be a permission denied issue, right? That means something is wrong with the. But I think I should have done some configuration changes because last day it was working. And then the previous video you saw that it was. But for the time being, just leave it as it is, right? Okay, let me just exit from here. For the time being, I'll without doing extra configurations, I'll go to root and I'll show you, right? Var delete, right? Uh, right? So in that, you're going to have these the volumes get created, right? So this place you are going to have volumes, right? So cd volumes. Let's go here. Now you can see this Jenkins data volume is created in this particular disk, right? So we no need to worry about which disk and which mount point for the time being because this is everything is local, right? I have, I mean, Sata is here, and in that I have the guest OS is running. So that is in my local disk. That doesn't matter, right? But anyway, it's going to be per system because it's in a local disk. So that is where the volume get created, because I created the volume called Jenkins data. Now you can see Jenkins data is here, right? Okay. So let's run the image, and if you come back to here, and if you see, if you check while image is running, the configuration stuff and all the Jenkins related things will remain here, right? We can see within the container as well as outside the container, because when the image is running inside the container also, this folder will be available, right? But here it is a copy, because what is inside this, as I mentioned, it is volatile. It's not going to, it's not a permanent thing, right? But what is permanently available in this volume, per system volume. We'll see those things. Don't worry about that much of detail, but I'm not sure I'm getting too much of detail for the time being, but I think just try to get an idea, right? Okay, no, I'm in root, no. So let me, Docker, right? Okay, so we are on our guide. Now we are almost done up to this place. Docker volume creation, we are fine. Then the command is docker run Jenkins docker detach, and this is alias docker. Yeah, this is something called docker in docker, DIND, docker in docker, because this particular setup is following the standard given by Jenkins official guide. And I'm not violating that one. If you take a look at the Jenkins guide, which I have shared the link on the previous video as well, it goes through in the same order, right? Because Docker in Docker DIND is something, as the name says, right? Docker in Docker means you want to communicate from a Docker to another Docker, right? From one Docker, you are trying to invoke another Docker, Docker in Docker, right? But in this particular practical, initially we might not be dealing with that, but later we will. So therefore, to facilitate that, before running the Jenkins container, we will need this one. Initially, we might not. You can skip for the time being, but since it is better to keep it running, so I am going to run that one as well. Right? So the very first step is configure DIND Docker in Docker. Right? So, and even if you check that one, let me explain the steps. First, you can see Docker container. This is I'm telling, okay, Docker engine container, run the container. The name is Jenkins-Docker, and -rm detach means it's like this now. Once the container exits, that means if I stop the container, it needs to remove the container ID and node. It needs to destroy all the things related to container. That's what rm and detach means. Otherwise, if you have to rerun the container with the same name, right? If I rerun the same way, it will say already exists, container name already exists. Since I don't want to do that, because container is a runtime environment, once I finish, I need to clean it off. That's why I'm telling -rm detach. It's a good practice actually, right? And network Jenkins, you can see privilege, right? -1 network Jenkins, network alias. So this is the network that we just created. So we are putting our image, our container into that network. You can see that I mentioned that one earlier, right? And this is TLS, transfer layer security, the certificates. I told you the MTLS and TLS certificates. For the time being, just keep it, right? Volume, our volume, right? And Jenkins Docker certificate. This is for certificate volume. And we are mapping it. Mapping means our local one to container one. That's the mapping. Right? Once the container is running, I will show you this one. This is my local one, which I just created here. Number this one. Create this one. We just created. It is there. Even if you go to the wallet Docker, you will see that, right? And we are mapping that one to inside the container, another folder. But once it's running, once the image is running, right? And the same thing for Docker volume, right? We can see in the container, we are going to have a folder called var Jenkins home. But in our local machine, the same folder, we are going to map it to this volume, which is just so earlier, right? and publish. This is the port for this Docker in Docker, and the image name is dind, Docker in Docker. Right? So let's pull it, right? I'm going to pull it, right? Don't know that I'm having that one locally already, but let's pull the image, right? Let me clear it first. Yeah, that image I already have. Even if I check Docker images, I think I have dind locally. Yes, there. Right? Dind is there. So that's why I didn't pull. You can see that dind is there. But if you do it originally, this is the output. I have given it here. When you're doing it the first time, unable to find the image locally because you don't have an image locally for the first time, right? So trying to pull from the repository, that means it will go to the official Jenkins repository where all the images are stored. We will pull it from there like that. It takes some time, right? Maybe depending on the speed, maximum 5 minutes, right? Okay, so once it's done, you will get the ID and your image is pulled. That's it. We didn't, no, image is pulled and it's going to run. No, we asked him to run, right? Pulling and running both at once, right? So it should run. Now I should see that image actually up and running. You can, if you run the docker ps command, very simple. I should have, yeah, you have, right? You can see that. Here it's running now. About a minute ago. I just now started, no? About a minute ago. Okay, so it's running. Right. So let's continue to the next step. What is our next step now? Run the Jenkins image. We ran the dind. Next step is Jenkins image. This one. So we can run that one as well. Again, you can see we are putting in the same network, Jenkins. Right? Anyway, dind and Jenkins has to be in the same network, right? Okay. But here you can see the ports. Jenkins is accessible from 8080. So I'm mapping the internal container port to my localhost port. And again, publish for this 5000 is a different port for communication. Leave it for the time being. And this is for the internal Docker layer 2376, right? We'll talk that one also later, right? This has a big description coming later. 2376 is a very important port, right? And this one is for the Jenkins, right? Okay, right. So let me run that one. Because 23.6, if you're doing some voice communications, this is very important, right? Let's discuss it later. Okay, run. Yeah. You can see Jenkins Blue Ocean is already used by, right? That is because I have, I think in my case, this is running Jenkins. So let's check. It's running. No, see, I have my one is already running. It's there. No, you can see. That's why it says. So now you show the message. But if I remove this one, it's fine. But anyway, there's a one already running, so it doesn't matter. It's okay. That's what it says. Jenkins Blue Ocean already running, so it's okay, fine. So I have it running. You have to remove it. Yeah, I don't need to remove it now for the time being. But in your case, your output should be similar to like this, right? Yeah, trying to pull deposit when running for the first time, it will be like that. Okay, download new image, and if you run the docker ps command like earlier, you will see the output like this. Now, ultimately, you should have, since you are doing freshly first time, you should have only these two images, these two containers, right? Images and the container, right? Docker ps, and this is the image, and that container is up and running. Okay, you can see 8080 for Jenkins port, and yeah, this is the container name. We have given that name, no? When it's running, you can see we gave that name, no? docker run minus name Jenkins hyphen blue ocean. So you can see Jenkins hyphen blue ocean. That's the container name. This is the image name, which is available in their repository, which has been pulled. We pull in that image. Okay, so for the time being, we just ran the container, but still we didn't connect to Jenkins server. So that will be on our next video, right? So we'll have shorter video. So I'll do that in the next video. Okay, so if you enjoy the session, put a subscribe. Time being, I'll stop here. I'll see you soon again. Okay, have a nice day and bye bye.